What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Bench. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. Got some more football news for you guys. Football news, football notes, advice, all that good stuff that you can count on us for week in and week out. But one thing you can also count on us for is to give you an update on our league, which is rapidly approaching the playoffs, as I'm sure everybody's league is out there, unless you're in some very weird settings that start your playoffs in like week 15. I actually am in a league like that, and I'm not very fond of it. But we start ours at a normal time. Pat, I have officially clinched the number one seed in our league by defeating one of the teams that beat me earlier in the year, as you sarcastically congratulate me. But Pat, this does leave one little fun fact. I mean, not super relevant, but you are officially the only person this year that I have not beaten at least once, because I'm 10-2.
That sure is a fun fact. That's a lot. I have a lot of fun with that.
That is a fun fact, and look, maybe that's some sort of precursor to destiny of me facing you and then knocking your ass off in the playoffs. But first things first, you have to get to the playoffs, or you just stay the only person that I can't beat.
Me being the one that has your number.
That could be true as well. Yeah, I ended up beating the team that had beaten me earlier in the year. Honestly, Pat, I didn't think I was going to. I needed Josh Dobbs to stay under 16, and he hadn't really done that in a few weeks. And then Josh Dobbs, I just watched this man throw pick. I didn't even have to really sweat it out. It was just pick after pick after pick. Never got close. So yeah, good for me.
I was in a similar spot where I expected your opponent to win, so I kind of thought like I had an outside shot at the playoffs. But if the season were to end today, I would be the 4th seed. I would make the playoffs. So, but I wasn't very nervous at all. Like, there was at one point where I'm like, I don't need to watch this shit. Like, I almost texted you, thank you, halfway through the third quarter.
Yeah. No, really.
Like, knowing my luck somehow.
Josh Dobbs would have ripped off like an 80-yard touchdown run or something after that and would have just fucked us both. Yeah, I totally understand that. But, yeah, I'm sitting at 10-2. Basically have this week as a completely free week to not even think about it. Honestly, I've found myself already looking ahead to, first week of the playoffs where my Texan stack is going to be facing the Jets, and I'm not very thrilled about that because I'm starting 2 receivers as of now against the number 1 receiver defense in fantasy football.
The Dolphins didn't have a problem.
No, they didn't. But, I mean, it wasn't like – was it the receivers that did? I know Tyreek Hill had a very good game. I guess Waddle was decent,
Waddle
too.
had 114. He just didn't have a touchdown.
Okay. All right, so I guess I should be confident then. I mean, it's not like I have a lot of other options. I'm not sending Calvin Ridley out there. So,
but obviously they've been better in general. You know, this seemed like more of an outlier than the actual thing. God, I forgot what Al Michaels called it, something stupid. The pick six at halftime. What a blow to Jets fans, man.
Yeah, that was just classic Jets right there. I mean, the Thanksgiving games in general were a mess, but that was wild.
10-6, and they looked good in the second half too. Oh, good, competent, better.
Sure.
So if you go into that 10-6, it's a whole different ball game. And
I will say our boy Tim Boyle might be the worst quarterback I've seen take the field on a football field this year, though. I mean, not that I expected anything less. We talked last week about his underwhelming college stats, going for 1 touchdown and 13 picks over 3 years at UConn, and then I think it was like 11 touchdowns and 13 picks in his 1 year at Eastern Kentucky. So leaves a lot to be desired on the field, but it is what it is. Pat, without further ado, let's get into our news here.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
And a not-so-late addition to our show sheet, but one that wasn't there to start the day, a piece of news that affects you very directly, unfortunately, Pat. Jonathan Taylor having thumb surgery. This one seeming to come out of nowhere as Pat pulls his shirt over his head.
I myself a little too much.
Pat's going to get us X-rated here.
I wanted to cover up. Oh, God. I mean, I've got better tits than half the girls on YouTube or wherever we are, so I don't know.
I think we have a single-digit amount of girls that probably listen to the podcast. Look, I've got female viewers on, like, my TikToks and stuff like that, but I can't imagine the podcast has more than I can't imagine the pod has more than 5 girls total that have ever listened to it. But nonetheless, Jonathan Taylor is having thumb surgery, hoping to be back in 2 to 3 weeks. That part coming from Colts owner Jim Irsay. But Taylor, I mean, Pat, I wasn't aware of this injury coming off of Sunday. I mean, he had a great game, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. There was nothing that seemed to be worrying anybody. And then it kind of just pops up on my phone today, and it's like Jonathan Taylor's status is in doubt going forward. And I'm like, excuse me? So with that, I don't know what to expect now.
Either a Bucs or a Colts reporter, I don't remember who it was, tweeted today that there was no indication, even after the game, talking to Jonathan Taylor in the locker room. And according to Ian Rappaport, it happened in the first half. So he went out there and had a really good second half with this injury. So that's why it was just so ominous. It's like, it's in doubt, but he played through it. But and it's the most important thing. Well, obviously besides the leg, but your thumb is so important to you as a running back. So
right.
It makes sense. It really makes sense. And they said IR will be a possibility. So, but I mean, I think really what this means is let's get aboard Zach Moss again, man.
Oh man, we get a sequel of Zach Moss, probably I would say the most unexpected like elite performer of this season. Because I mean we're going to talk about Kyren Williams in a little bit, and yeah, that came out of nowhere in a way. Puka Nacua obviously also coming out of nowhere in a way, but like Zach Moss is a guy that we thought we knew, right? Like we thought we knew what Zach Moss was. We watched him underwhelm in Buffalo for a while, and then now he comes in. You know, I had that 2-game suspension to start the year, and we knew that there was an opening in the Colts running back room waiting for the Jonathan Taylor situation to get sorted out. We saw him, you know, get activated, and I don't think anybody thought anything of it. And then this dude just comes out ripping it, and now he's going to have a chance to rip it again for the next 3 weeks, it sounds like. And yeah, look, if Zach Moss is available on your waiver wire, you better go get him. Do everything you can to go get him. I'm sure whoever has top priority in your waiver order, or whoever has the most fab left, if he's available, they are going to be the person that gets him. But at least make sure you make a concerted effort if he is out there, because he's out there in about half of leagues.
If you were a fab saver waiting for this moment, this was the moment you were waiting for. I mean, Zach Moss is still 10th in the league in rushing, when him and Bijan Robinson as well, who we'll talk about, have 10 less rushes than the next lowest in that top 10. So for being a non-factor in the last 3 games, well, I mean, he had 8 carries on Sunday that he was somewhat involved, but for disappearing the 2 weeks before, the fact that he's still in the top 10 is remarkable.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see how much Zach Moss has been able to hold on in that leaderboard, but he may be able to get reinserted right back into your lineups for a team in the Indianapolis Colts that Pat currently owns a playoff spot if the season were to end today. We'll talk later as well about the current playoff situation in both the AFC and the NFC and what we expect to transpire the rest of the way. But if things ended today, the Indianapolis Colts of all teams, led by Gardner Minshew, would be a playoff team. But that is the news right now. Jonathan Taylor is out for a few weeks. And
that's the thing about Jonathan Taylor, too, is just that he really just started looking really good. You know, the last couple of weeks, you saw that ceiling. You saw why people were going to take him probably mid-first round before this whole contract injury thing popped up before the season. Oh, and it just sucks. You know, I'm a Jonathan Taylor owner. That was sort of my my trade acquisition, you know, getting him midway through the year like that. And it's just so brutal, because I think he would have probably been a league winner. I think he would have been on a lot of championship winning rosters. And yeah, I am depressed.
The timing really couldn't be worse. I mean, most leagues, I imagine, have 1 or 2 regular season weeks left, and then their playoffs start. So, you're not going to have Jonathan Taylor as you try to push for the playoffs, and then you won't have him for the start of the playoffs, if not longer. Definitely some brutal timing here on JT, but obviously prioritize Zach Moss if you can. In our league, he has smartly been owned by, the non-JT owner, because you're the JT owner. He's been owned this whole time, as he has in also a decent chunk of leagues, but just double check, make sure he's not on your wire, because if he is, he needs to be not Absolutely. After tomorrow or the next day. Pat, the next piece of news here, we got Justin Jefferson is finally going to make his way back onto an NFL field next week. This was kind of the way we thought it was trending after the last couple weeks of them bringing him along so slowly. We were like, all right, look, the Vikings have that bye coming up in week 13, so would they just wait until after that to bring Justin Jefferson back? That is exactly what they chose to do. He will be out there. He will be active week 14. But exactly what can we expect from him from a fantasy perspective? I don't know. I mean, look, we know how good Justin Jefferson is as a player, but every player on the Vikings has had to adjust to not Kirk Cousins being their quarterback. And we don't even know if Josh Dobbs is going to be the quarterback coming out of the bye. So obviously, all of that to say, if you have Justin Jefferson, you are putting him in your lineup, but
Absolutely.
You still need to maybe mitigate the expectations a little bit, because this is going to be either Josh Dobbs or potentially Jaron Hall or even potentially Nick Mullins under center after the bye.
Yeah, you have to start Jefferson, but looking at Monday night's game, you don't want to start any Vikings pass catcher. I mean, TJ Hawkinson has built a solid rapport with Josh Dobbs quickly, but you have to start Justin Jefferson either way. And I mean, we'll talk about Josh Dobbs soon, but I mean, they need him. They need him to keep pushing. A really really brutal loss on Monday night, man.
God.
The Bears were the first team this year to win without scoring a touchdown. Like they had it for the giving, and a lot of bad interceptions. Just a lot went wrong, and they need him. They need this, kind of, injection into their system here.
Yeah, they definitely do. Look, the playoffs are not out of the picture for the Vikings, which is still, feels crazy to say after losing Jefferson for such a long time and losing Kirk Cousins. But if they, make some moves here and can play the right cards, maybe they can squeak their way into the playoffs. But we will have to wait and see who is even leading that charge. If it's not Dobbs, who it might end up being. I hope it's not Nick Mullins. But again, we'll talk about that situation in a second. First, I want to talk about, before we get into all that, a quick State of the Patriots address, because Pat, I think, for as many comedy videos and skits and stuff as I make, I don't focus on my Patriots fandom too much. I mean, I do definitely a little bit more here on the podcast because we're talking about real life football. But even the last couple of weeks, I haven't had much to talk about because it's just been such a disaster season. I'll say this. I don't care if it makes me a bad fan. I don't care what the criticisms are of me after what I'm about to say. I'm happy Chad Ryland missed that field goal. Man, he saved all of America from overtime of the New York Giants versus the New England Patriots. And I, more than anything, I just want, if this season is going to be terrible, let it be terrible. I've said it before so many times, being caught in limbo and being in that mid-range of draft picks is just the last place that you want to be as a team. You do not want to be in purgatory. So, I feel like it's almost lucky as Patriots fans that we don't have to deal at, look, everything could play out in a myriad of ways going forward, but we didn't have to deal with several straight years of okay, we're going to have the 14th pick and then the 16th pick and then the 12th pick and see what we can do. This is a bottom out year, and I'm thankful that we have it because the Patriots are at this point almost a lock for a top 3 or top 4 pick. It's, the odds are even heavily trending more for potentially 1 or 2 at this rate, and I'm just excited to see who the new guy under center, most likely it's going to be a quarterback that we draft, who that guy is going to be. And I'm looking forward to it, Pat. It's new beginnings here for us Patriots fans, and I'm glad that it's a quick reset. We didn't have to suffer in the mud for too long wondering when we'd get a chance at a top guy, because we may have it this year.
Yeah, you may have it this year.
Or
don't
we
think
will, Yums, have it? Continue.
Okay. I don't think you're a bad fan for tanking, honestly. I heard this wild Giants rant guy on Twitter Spaces basically just going off about oh, you're happy, I'm glad we won this game. It's why? What benefit does it get you to have even the 7th or 8th pick? No. Even in the deepest of drafts, you're still kind of throwing a dart. You're probably taking best player available when if you have a need, which the Patriots have, I'd argue the most glaring need in the most glaring need at quarterback in the whole league. Yeah, and you want to get Caleb Williams or Drake May. Obviously, Jane Daniels is coming seemingly out of nowhere, shockingly. But I mean, he's battle tested. But if you know that there are going to be 2 really solid prospects at the top of the draft, you need to be at the top of the draft. If you know you are not going to compete, you really should not be competing. And fortunately for the Patriots, even if they try to improve by benching Mac Jones, at the very least, that will keep things just the same. So I think
we'd be
they're
benching Mac Jones for new Mac Jones.
Sticking in that top 2. But my question for you is, I mean, it's a question that's been asked, but it almost just seems is it actually going to happen? They need to move on from, well, it's more of a rhetorical question, but they need to move on from Bill Belichick, sadly.
Yeah, I think they do. It's sad to say because he's obviously the last holdover from the dynasty, and you wonder what could he do.
Matthew Slater is offended by your remark.
Oh, okay, you wonder what he could do with an actual quarterback prospect, but it's you gotta wonder if the team is tuning him out a little bit and just has it run its course. Is it time for the natural progression to take hold here? Because he's made so many draft mistakes that I think that's where really it comes from. It's we haven't drafted a halfway decent offensive player other than Ramondre Stevenson in God knows how long. It's just there needs to be a full reset here, and I'm ready for the full reset. It's going to be weird, but again, I'm just happy that we are not in absolute purgatory, and I'm hoping I will be buying a Caleb Williams or Drake May jersey here in a few months. If we don't take quarterback, I don't know what's going on, but hopefully we do.
As much of a goober and bad NFL coach that Rex Ryan was, his rants on Bill Belichick was very on point and just funny. Great delivery, great everything, and it's just true. Like, your team stinks. Like,
it's bad.
Your team stinks really bad. So
there's almost no redeeming, like, even position group on this team. Like, there's nothing that the Patriots are really above average. Like, Jabril Peppers is having a nice year, sure. I mean, David Andrews is still there as the center. Ramondre, I think, is still a solid running back. But
Demario Douglas has come on a bit.
Demario Douglas has looked fun, but again, it's like that's not a wide receiver one, and it's of course. It's disgusting. But yes, the Patriots, I find it's a very weird and very new experience, as all Patriots fans, I'm sure, are feeling, that we are now looking ahead to the draft, and not only the draft, but being on top of the draft or near the top. So that'll be a fun one to watch play out. Certainly a polar opposite experience for us Patriots fans, but we will be experiencing it nonetheless. Pat, back to business here. Back to the Vikings, because we got to talk about that game that Josh Dobbs just had. Not only, we were talking about how he might impact Justin Jefferson if he's the quarterback, but we don't know if he's going to be the quarterback because, as you so aptly put here on our sheet, the pastronaut is now the astronaut, which is just the word astronaut, but we got to take the pause because, man, he was ass last night.
One of the worst performances by any quarterback this year.
Oh, yeah. It was brutal. I mean, look, I was not expecting to see just a complete lack of competence from both of those teams playing last night, but that was what we got. And I mean, yeah, you just won. But Vikings Bears, I mean, really lived up to just the absolute worst case scenario that those two teams could have had. Now, Josh Dobbs has obviously been kind of the Cinderella of this year. He's been one of the main characters of this NFL season. And as quickly as he came on is as quickly as he might disappear, because the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell have already said are evaluating a potential change at quarterback. And I can understand why. At the same time, Pat, I do want to give some credit to the Bears defense, because I think it's very easy to completely blame Josh Dobbs for falling apart and being like, okay, the insanity runs over, and maybe it is, but the Bears D has not been bad. So in their first 5 games, they allowed a 240-plus yard passer in 4 of those games to open the season. Now, in their past 7 games, they've only done that once. Dobbs was under pressure all night. Montez Sweat had 7 pressures. DeMarcus Walker had 4. And then you watch those interceptions. I mean, look, some of them were bad decisions without question. I mean, the first one was a bad throw picked off by Jalen Johnson. The second pick was right off Jordan Addison's hands. I don't blame him for that. The third pick was a tipped pass to KJ Osborne, batted in the air. I don't really blame him for that. I mean, was there a lot of separation on that route? No, but are you expecting the ball to get batted directly up in the air? Yeah. No. And then the fourth interception, look, heavy pressure, still a terrible decision despite that pressure. I'm not going to completely, pretend that's not his fault, but he's forcing things at that point, right? Because things have been going badly all night. I think a week off reset, I think we could see a decent version of Josh Dobbs. Now, one thing I will mention is there was another throw that should have been an interception that I don't want to excuse, because Jalen Johnson could have had his hands on another one there. That honestly might have been Dobbs' worst throw of the night, and that one he just got lucky on. But the point stands. I mean, he had some bad throws, but it was against a defense that's really coming on here at the end of the year, and I just don't think this is a reason to completely write off Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs is just the guy that I think realistic people knew that he was. He's a guy that can catch lightning in a bottle as a journeyman quarterback, and he's a guy that I think can still provide this team some solid performances. That's why I don't think it's an automatic no-brainer move to move on from him at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'd agree. I probably would give him one more shot at it, because he did, as Kevin O'Connell said this morning in his very wishy-washy press conference, like, he's done a lot of good things for us, but I think it's just a part of the fact that game where he looked so electric, they weren't expecting him. Like, he didn't know the game plan. They didn't know the game plan. Now that teams have, are able to game plan for him, you're able to stop him, because at the end of the day, he's a career backup. So, like, how talented can a true backup truly be? So it's not that difficult to game plan for him. But did you see that one throw late in the going to, like, Jordan Addison that was going to be a touchdown? Not only, did the ball bring him out of bounds, like, caught it out of bounds. Like, it wasn't like he, it dragged him out of bounds after he caught it. Like, a clear touchdown and just a horrible throw.
I will say certainly not the best throw, but also really bad awareness by Jordan Addison, because you can still toe tap that and go out at the whatever yard line it was. That shouldn't have been incomplete. If Josh Dobbs makes a good pass, yes, it's a touchdown, but also Addison needs to be more aware there. Nonetheless, I understand your point.
Yeah, and like we said, this is a team that's still kind of on the brink of contention here. So they're going to need the best quarterback play possible. And we've seen Nick Mullins look good for a couple games back in San Francisco, and we really haven't seen much of Jaren Hall. So the question is, do they, maybe it's time to move on from Josh Dobbs, but do they have a better option? And right now, the answer is probably not.
Yeah, I think if they're going to move on from Josh Dobbs, it needs to be to Jaren Hall. I don't see there being any reason to move on to Nick Mullins. At least, look, Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins are both backup caliber quarterbacks for their careers, but at least Josh Dobbs is mobile, and at least Josh Dobbs has shown some level of being able to make big plays on a consistent basis. I've seen Nick Mullins as nothing more than a long-term downgrade. Yeah, maybe he takes the confidence of being named the starter and rips a solid game or two, but he's not a guy that's going to lead them into the playoffs or lead them into, winning a playoff game or two somehow. If they're going to move on, it should be to Jaren Hall, a guy who looks smallest sample size possible, but looked really good before he had to come out of that game for Josh Dobbs due to that concussion. So if you're going to go with anybody, please go with him. Don't go with Nick Mullins.
And obviously they trusted him to be in that position to start him. Obviously they didn't have Dobbs yet. Nick Mullins was still on IR, but they trusted him enough to keep him as the primary backup when Nick Mullins went out. They knew that there was a chance Kirk gets hurt and he was the next man up, and they not only trusted him to do that, but they trusted him to start that game with obviously no expectation of him getting as hurt. God, he was in concussion protocol for a couple weeks. We talked about it. Typically, it's a 1 week thing if you're going to miss it, but still. But yeah, I do think Hall is the better one, just because Nick Mullins is a diet Kirk Cousins. This kind of pocket passing, not very mobile guy. I just don't see what that brings to the table right now for a team that needs a lot of spark on offense. You need to dump probe. You need to dump, gasoline on this fire to light this spark. You can't just get a little spark here. So they need whatever they can get. And Nick Mullins probably just does not have that.
No, I don't think he does. I don't see much benefit to starting him. Maybe he's a marginally better pure passer than Josh Dobbs. Who knows? I think you're really splitting hairs of mediocrity here, and there's really no reason to do it. If they move on to Jaren Hall, great. I'll trust their evaluation system and trust that he's going to be a better option for them going forward. I think Jaren Hall might be the best bet for, getting fantasy production out of a guy like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I'll say this, Jordan Addison's been completely off my fantasy radar now. I mean, he's been a guy I haven't even thought about putting in my lineup now ever since Josh Dobbs took over, which is unfortunate, but that is the way she goes. So the Vikings certainly have some questions to answer coming out of their bye week. Pat, really quick, I skipped over it because I got so excited to talk about the Patriots.
Yeah, I was going to bring...
I got a little excited to talk about the Patriots. Yeah, so there was, there's some more questions that have to be answered here around the NFL, and probably one of the biggest ones revolves around the Carolina Panthers. Another piece of news that we had is Frank Reich fired after just 11 games. Frank Reich now losing 2 head coaching jobs in the span of 2 years. Hopefully, do we know who he's getting replaced by? Yeah, I remember seeing some interim structure. It didn't matter. There's guys who are already in the system.
Chris Tabor, the special teams coach.
Yes,
he's
thank you. So the reason I mentioned that is because Chris Tabor, I assume, will be a slightly better replacement than Jeff Saturday was in Indianapolis when Frank Reich got fired last year.
But Greg Olsen wants this job now.
Yeah, that was my first thought was Jeff Saturday when I heard about Greg Olsen. Do not hire somebody to be your head coach who has literal 0 coaching experience. I know he's a respected veteran. I know he's one of the best of all time at his position, but no, we're steering clear of that. But the Panthers will need to find a head coach after this year, assuming that Chris Tabor does not impress enough that he can keep that job. But Pat, what an absolute disaster here for the Carolina Panthers. And I want to cop to this really quick because, as much as I want to flex, the good takes I've had in the past, this was a terrible take by me. I said that the Panthers coaching staff had the chance to be one of the most underrated and productive coaching staffs in the league just because of all the name brands they had. Josh McCown, Deuce Staley, guys who have succeeded at their positions in the NFL. Thomas Brown, a highly touted play caller. At least he's still around, but McCown and Staley both got fired. So This coaching staff, an absolute disaster from top to bottom. I don't think they were necessarily helped by the free agent class they brought in to assist Bryce Young. It's just gross and very unfortunate for Bryce Young's development. The Panthers are in the absolute toilet, and they don't even have a first-round pick this year.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, they made free agents. You know, they got very safe, very low ceiling free agents here. Like, as if they were a team that wanted to get the first pick again.
Right.
But they didn't have it. You know, getting guys like Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst, DJ Chark, Miles Sanders. Just a whole bunch of mid, man. Just terrible. And there was another, like, viral clip. I think it was Jonathan Mingo, where, like, he basically, like, toe tapped out of bounds. Like, my man, like, threw his body up into the air when it's just like, he went backwards. Like, he was going back. I don't know what the fuck he was doing, but you know, what a dumpster fire of an organization. I was just shocked. You know, because sometimes there are things where it's like when Josh McDaniels got fired, I was shocked. Not because, like, wow, I can't believe this happened. It's more so like, I just can't believe they did it.
Yeah.
But, like, this was more of like a what kind of shock, where if you're David Tepper here, there's been all sorts of talk that, like, you know, of him saying today, Bryce Young, unanimous. Everyone in our building wanted Bryce Young. Well, no shit they wanted Bryce Young, because you wanted Bryce Young, and you had the final say, regardless of what everybody else wanted. So, like, you bring in Frank Reich, obviously beforehand, so they didn't know that they hadn't traded up for, obviously not, hadn't traded up for that pick yet. So you bring in Frank Reich with the opportunity here that you can get, once you trade up, you get whoever you want. You get whichever of these two, or three, I guess, Anthony Richardson, quarterbacks that you want. And that is the most important thing, to make sure that the chemistry is there between the head coach, especially, you know, with an offensive pedigree like Frank Reich. And obviously this is not confirmed, but you go out there and get the guy that he didn't want. Mm-hmm. There was all that talk about CJ Stroud going number one, and it's like, there was fire to that smoke. Because there were probably rumblings coming out of Carolina that a lot of people, including Frank Reich, wanted CJ Stroud. And obviously, hindsight's 2020. Stroud looks like, you know, spoiling a viewer question, the surefire offensive rookie of the year, while Bryce Young has looked terrible. Yeah. But just to do that, like, just to go get Frank Reich and then not really work with him to get the guy they wanted, and then to just hand the guy 11 games later, not even really to give him a chance. I mean, maybe they just kind of saw the writing on the wall that, like, hey, this isn't working. We might as well, you know, try to trash this right now. But they do not have a first-round pick. They gave up so many resources to move up, to take the guy that was not truly their guy. Like, David Tepper can get whoever he wants. He's not calling the shots down on the football field.
Right.
His opinion is not important. Sorry.
No.
But it's not even a sorry. It's just flat out not important. And then there's this whole confusing ass thing about them. They were like, oh, we're going to trade up for 2 and get Stroud. I don't even know. Like, I'm so confused by that quote, like what it actually means. And also, why the fuck was he saying that?
Yeah, so that quote, first of all, David Tepper is an absolute moron and has fired 4 coaches now in the span of 2 years across the NFL and MLS team he owns. I believe it's Charlotte FC.
Justice for that rule.
Oh, God. Yeah, so the quote that, and just the whole quote, the whole little interview bite he gave was very weird today, press conference bite, about CJ Stroud is very weird. So Panthers owner David Tepper confirmed that they were supposed to trade up to, what was this? This is a weird way to word this. So the Panthers were going to trade up to number 2 because they thought that the Texans had a trade already done up to number 1. That was the Panthers' understanding.
That's where I was lost in that whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, so the Panthers for a little bit were under the impression that the Texans were going to trade up to number 1, take Bryce Young, and then the Panthers would go to number 2 and take CJ Stroud. That is a scenario that, look, if Tepper's saying it, I believe it because there's really no benefit to him to admitting that kind of thing. But, Pat, it's a really bad look to admit that. Why are you willingly giving that information out to the media telling them and letting fans fantasize about a situation where you ended up with CJ Stroud? What is the point of that other than to be like making fans wish that that is what happened? I don't understand. If you really have full confidence in Bryce Young, which is what he spent the rest of that press conference talking about, to his credit, he, like you mentioned, he said they were, unanimous in the building on Bryce Young. He still has full confidence in Bryce Young. If that's true, why are you telling people about hypotheticals where you don't have Bryce Young on your team? It's just weird. Like, that, I'm sure that situation did play out, but you don't have to tell people that. Like, that is, I'm sure there's a million draft trades that almost happened that people don't ever bring up because it just would reflect a potential lack of confidence in the guy you did end up with. Why do that in the middle of this season when your guy looks as bad as Bryce Young has been through, I think, largely no fault of his own? But it's very, very weird energy. I think David Tepper is about to quickly become owner public enemy number one now that our boy Dan Snyder's out. I thought it might be Jim Irsay after the whole JT situation, but he got him extended and we're all good there now.
And
so it might be, he's kind of funny. It might be David Tepper now, and I would not be surprised if it was.
In the thing too, like maybe he said that to say like, hey, the Texans wanted Bryce Young over CJ Stroud too. Like,
sure,
but again, like to your point, of course, when this guy has the final decision, like in all those TV and cartoon business movies, it's like the boss spews a terrible idea and everyone's like, oh yeah, great idea, oh yeah. Just just to appease the big guy. Like, I can see that happening in that exact situation. They are in just. Are they in the worst? I think they're probably in the worst spot because they are bad. Like, again, similar to the Patriots, nothing has been good about this team.
No.
Who's Chuba Hubbard? Like, is he the closest thing to like a true success story that I
mean, they got Brian Burns at least, which is like a better player than the Patriots could ever pray to have right now. The Patriots have Judon, though, who's obviously older, but is at least productive when he's on the field. But yeah, the Panthers are at the very least, tied for the most down bad franchise in the NFL. I just don't see a need for him to, like, that whole thing, even though he, again, preached confidence about Bryce Young, it comes off as very defensive. I don't see a need for you to be defensive about taking the guy number one who everyone and their mother thought was going to be the number one pick. Yeah. Pretty much everybody had Bryce Young graded above CJ Stroud. Like, yes, there was a little smoke as we got closer. I think, honestly, day of, that Stroud could go number one, and we heard about that. But it wasn't much. Like, the entire pre-draft process was Bryce Young, Bryce Young, Bryce Young. Why are you feeling like you have to defend yourself after 10 games of him playing poorly? Like, yeah, it hasn't looked good. And yeah, CJ Stroud's making it look even worse. But, like, just relax. Like, this is where owners get, I think, too much in the public eye, and they just make things worse for their entire franchise. Fire your coach, get a new coach now, find like that hopefully can, maximize Bryce Young. Go out and get yourself some free agents that will be a little better than a supporting cast of Hayden Hurst and DJ Chark, and see where it goes. But stop saying CJ Stroud's name. There's no reason for David Tepper to utter CJ Stroud's name at this point. They're not even in the same conference. Leave it alone. It's very weird.
And the thing is, I think the replacement is in-house. Not Chris Tabor, not Thomas Brown. I think it's Jim Caldwell. He's a special advisor right now. I think they need someone with a lot of experience to go in there and truly be committed to Bryce Young. Obviously, if Jim Caldwell's not truly committed to Bryce Young, but their biggest priority needs to be in this coaching search, are you all in on Bryce Young? And if Jim Caldwell's all in on Bryce Young, this is a guy who, again, got fired in Indy and Detroit with, like, modestly bad seasons, like, nothing terrible. Like, this is a guy with a pretty good track record who, has shown to be a really good offensive mind and a really well-respected guy in the locker room. And that seems like the perfect kind of guy to build up Bryce Young. But, who knows? Like, they may need to clean house completely, or I don't know what they want to do. But obviously, it's a bit too early in the cycle to be talking about it. But it's interesting now that something that was once so rare, we have now had 3 straight years of coaches getting fired before the end of the season. Obviously, Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, Nathaniel Hackett in Denver last year, and now Frank Reich. Like, who was the, like, I'm trying to, was it Bobby Petrino? No, Bobby Petrino resigned within one season. I'm trying to think the last time like a coach got canned after less than a year.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know I had looked it up when it happened to Urban because it was such a rarity, but I don't remember. I know it was many, many years prior, like it hadn't happened in a long time, that a coach got fired before the end of their first season. I mean, what a terrible hire, like, you have to admit that you made if you're going to do that. Like, it's not even your ego just takes such a hit. And maybe that's where the defensiveness comes from with Tepper there, because it is just a terrible move to have to defend. As Pat currently looks through the archives of the NFL.
It's an athletic article. Come on.
You're going to have to
I don't have
scroll
your,
down.
In the last 12 seasons, a dozen coaches have been fired after just one season or less. What?
This is Pat ASMR, if you guys are wondering.
Okay.
I bet you I have better Googling skills than Pat does. Coaches to be fired before end of first.
Yeah, I just put in
season.
less than a year.
Before end of first season. Okay, so you were right about Bobby Petrino quitting the Falcons. Yeah, so I think because there's been like 3 straight seasons of this now. Was it Marty Schottenheimer in Washington? That might have been it in 2001. That's my best guess at this point.
Because like looking through all these guys, they were all fired like after the year. Even like Cam Cameron in Miami. So I guess I was right that it was Bobby Petrino was the last coach to not make it a year, but obviously he quit to go to Arkansas. And going back to Arkansas, it seems, by the way, too, which is
that came out
because
today.
the last time he was there, he was in a neck brace after a motorcycle. But really remarkable now that. But the thing is, the difference, Urban Meyer and Nathaniel Hackett, those were disasters. Like, those were 2 of, like, the worst head coaching showings in league history. Frank Reich is not on par with them at all.
Well, those teams were supposed to be relatively competitive, and the fact that they weren't was what got those guys fired. Like, yes, the Panthers probably hoped for better than 1-9, but, like, in your first year with a rookie quarterback and the rest of the roster that you have, like, your ceiling was even lower. Like, you look at what the Texans are doing, and maybe you might say, well, okay, maybe we should be able to do that because they were in a similar situation. But, like, your ceiling was probably 5 wins on the – like, he's not – I don't know. I understand the firing, but his coaching performance definitely doesn't I don't think stack up to the other guys that got fired. It's not quite as bad.
No, I just don't get it. Like, you go and hire a guy and say, like, hey, like, we have a first overall rookie quarterback here. We didn't give you much help on the roster. And there are expectations. Like, you could be fired. Like, that's crazy. Like, similar to, like when the Texans went David Culley and Lovie Smith back-to-back only just to, like, can them. It's like, what are we doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're hiring a guy, like, knowing full well you probably just aren't going to keep him long-term. It's just pointless. You're just wasting a year of your franchise. And in the worst, you to do it where you don't have a first-round pick. If they had a first-round pick, we'd be singing Frank Reich would be doing his job then because that's probably what they would want.
Right.
But just David Tepper is just kind of a bozo, is what it seems here. And it's funny, who was it? Jerry Richardson before? Yeah, and I mean that dude was just a fucking racist. So I mean, I guess this guy can't be worse than him. But in terms of personnel and in terms of kind of just like thinking, he's too important when it comes to the on-field decisions. Just a complete bozo.
Yeah, the guy's probably got to go, and it's always a tough situation when you feel that your franchise's future hangs in the, it depends on whether an owner is going to decide to fuck off or not, because that is completely up to them unless they're found to have some kind of wrongdoing like Dan Snyder was.
Jerry Jones.
And even that took forever to actually transpire, getting Dan Snyder out of there. So, Panthers fans, I feel for you. Hopefully things look up, because right now they're pretty bad.
Have you ever met a Panthers fan?
Yeah, my mom's friend has 2 kids who are somehow ended up Panthers fans. I think because they like grew up watching Cam maybe in his prime. They're younger, but yeah, and then you mentioned Chuba Hubbard earlier. I went to get coffee before football on Sunday this past week and saw a man in a Chuba Hubbard jersey. I nearly fell to my knees how confused
Denver?
I was. In Denver, Colorado. Yeah.
That's
and
electric.
Look, Denver's a melting pot of like people from all over, but still to see a Chuba Hubbard jersey out in the wild, I was baffled. I saw Panthers and I saw 30 and it didn't even click. I was like, it's probably some old thing. And then I walked past him the other way, looked back and saw Hubbard on the back. I was like, I gotta go home. I can't be out here anymore. But yes, the Panthers extremely down bad, don't have a first round pick, and they are watching DJ Moore be, I think, the 5th leading receiver in the NFL over there in Chicago. So shout out to Chicago, I guess. They're gonna be sitting there with probably the number 1 overall pick again on behalf of Carolina.
They win a game last night, don't fall back in the draft anymore, and still have the 1st overall pick because the Panthers are dog shit and are seemingly going to get that first pick. Like, Chicago? Hell yeah.
Yeah, Bears to the moon. All right, let's move on to some more fantasy football reacts from this week. I think the biggest guy that kind of popped off in terms of fantasy football was a guy who was just coming off IR, and that is Kyren Williams. I need my dude to relax. I was able to survive facing Kyren Williams this week, but it wasn't easy because this man picked up right where he left off. 16 carries for 143 yards, 6 catches for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns, 61% of snaps. We came into this game, and what Sean McVay had said was it was going to be like a 2-to-1 distribution of Kyren to Royce Freeman, and it was. Royce Freeman got a decent chunk of carries and had a good day himself, but Kyren Williams just taking this backfield and just putting a stranglehold on it, proving that he is the best guy back there. And it's just been fascinating to see because by all accounts, coming into this year and the scouting reports on Kyren Williams were that he was just nothing special as a player. And he is proving that he's just got this NFL thing down. I don't really know how else to put it. He has been a monster. The only knock on him at this point is that his next 2 games are against slightly tougher defenses. It's the Browns and the Ravens, even though neither one have been, completely locked down in terms of preventing the run in fantasy point perspectives. But still, obviously, you would rather some softer matchups for Kyren. Either way, you're leaving this man in your lineups. What an absolute freak he's become.
I think you have to. And his basically dominance of the offense came at the expense of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who really just had, were non-factors out there. Obviously, Tyler Higbee pulls 2 touchdowns out of his ass. But Bran knows my tight end situation. I lost Mark Andrews. I got Isaiah Likely. And now he's on bye. I am not picking up Tyler Higbee.
Come on, dude. It's his time. It's the Tyler Higbee breakout that we've been waiting for 6 years.
6 years. Just
it's coming.
Stop it. That man's floor has been the center of the earth this year. But yeah, you've got to roll with Williams. And again, I was honestly shocked to see Royce Freeman get the work that he did. Because, I figured they were kind of going to ease him in. But he got 13 carries to Williams' 16. And produced, 77 yards and got the rushing touchdown. But we saw before the injury that Sean McVay was willing to give Kyren Williams every single snap on offense as a running back. So if that is going to – I think it's going to get to that point again. But obviously coming off an injury, missing a few weeks like that, you want to ease him back in. But in a couple weeks, I think we're going to be close, to him playing – or at least getting him almost all the touches, probably not playing all the snaps, but getting most of the touches. It's so cool. Who would have thought going into the year that Kyren Williams would probably be the biggest breakout player?
No, really. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I think you could consider, league winners. And again, I think that term is often overused. But there's really a handful of guys that truly qualify for that title this year. And I think Kyren Williams is probably on top of all of them. This is a guy who kind of just comes out of nowhere. I mean, yeah, we had heard his name here and there. We knew that he was going to get worked in behind Cam Akers, rest in peace. And then it just turns out he's going to get every carry in this bag. This was so far on the end of the spectrum for his range of outcomes that nobody could have seen it coming. At least, and again, I'll bring up names like, Puka Nacua. He came into the year as a starter. So productivity wasn't completely out of the question for him, even though we didn't know the heights it would reach. Devon Achane, once you saw all the injuries pile up ahead of him, you were like, okay, maybe he could do something. Again, we didn't think that he would reach those heights pre-injury, but he did. Kyren Williams, though, just beyond unexpected for this guy. And now he's back doing it, and he's ready to do it for your fantasy playoffs as long as you can get through these 2 tougher matchups in the immediate future.
Yeah, obviously he's not the most valuable fantasy player, but he has been the best value. Because I'm assuming his ADP was going very late rounds if he was being drafted at all in terms of his ADP. So, and again, we've seen it. We saw it years ago with Todd Gurley. We saw it at points with Cam Akers that Sean McVay likes one running back. And if he has a guy that he thinks can handle that, then he's going to give him that. See, now I've been thinking of the sus things before I say it, because I was going to say he's just going to give him that load. You know what? No, he's going to give Kyren Williams that load. But tough matchups here, but you got to keep him in your lineup, and you've got to expect that he will be very much helping your team, push for a championship.
Kyren Williams doing a lot of the heavy lifting to help me reach the next round of the playoffs in the Scott Fish Bowl tournament, by the way. My team is in the playoffs for that and has made it past the first cuts. Kyren Williams getting me, I think it was about 50 points in that league because of the scoring settings that they have. You get points for like first downs and stuff, and Kyren was very, very helpful in that league. But yeah, just been an absolute monster, and we expect it to continue. Pat, there's a few guys here who we've kind of talked about over the past few weeks whose fantasy values have just, not been hanging in the balance, but have been volatile at times, and so we just kind of been talking about them, and I want to give some updates on them. So these guys are Bijan Robinson, Chris Olave, and Tony Pollard. Again, guys who it may sound like a weird group of players off the bat, but they've just been topics of conversation here the last several weeks, so we'll go through them one by one. Bijan Robinson, if you're a Bijan owner, which I am, we're feeling pretty good now. I think Bijan to the moon. It is Bijan season. And look, with Arthur Smith as the head coach, things are always subject to change. But it does seem that he has realized giving Bijan Robinson a few more touches and a few more high-value touches is in fact in his best interest. Who would have thought? I think we had basically the same conversation last week because Bijan had a good game, but it's nice to see him string together 2 in a row and actually be one of the tippy-top running backs in terms of scoring this week in all formats. I'm just excited because, look, I acquired Bijan largely because of what his schedule would be down the stretch. Bijan's got a pretty cakewalky schedule here the rest of the way, and if he's going to be getting these kind of touches and these kind of high-value touches, this is just very, very good news for us Bijan owners. I'm very excited.
Yeah, obviously we knew Tyler Algier was not going to go away, and he still had 10 carries, and again, solid day, 64 yards, but Bijan Robinson feels like the lead back. Like he feels like in situations where the game is on the line, situations where you need to make a play, it's Bijan Robinson on the field. And
Finally.
Again, even I said a few weeks ago, like even when people were benching him, people were like, "Oh, we gotta, really think things through here." I kept him in just because of the targets that he gets. He got 3 more catches this week. As involved as he is in the passing game as well, and obviously, once he gets the ball in the open field, he's incredibly dynamic. But it is very good to see not only is he getting more touches, the fact that he is doing something with those touches, because obviously the more and more he does with those touches, you'd think the more a cinder block head like Arthur Smith would use him. But I don't like to give that man too much credit.
No, neither do I. But he gets a little credit for what he's done with Bijan lately. 2 touchdowns this past week, and it just... let's keep that train rolling, baby. Don't suddenly spring, Cordero Patterson on me and give him more touches. He actually had some nice runs as well in that game. But nonetheless, no, he didn't. You're not listening to this, Arthur. Don't give Cordero any more touches. Thank you. More for Bijan. Get Bijan up over 30 one of these days. That would be nice. All right, another player in that same division, Chris Olave. Put up a pretty good first half and then unfortunately got concussed and had to miss the second half. He was up over 100 yards in one half of football. And Pat, it just seems like the Kamara dump-off fest is finally behind us. And it's been trending that way a little bit. And I think Olave is finally feeling the positive effects of that. So Kamara was dominating targets when he first came off his, was it suspension? It was suspension for Kamara, right? Came off suspension. So the first 4 weeks after Kamara came back, he had these target totals: 14, 3, 8, and 14. Now, in the last 4 weeks, he's had 5, 5, 7, and 5. So look, he's still got a solid floor of targets, but he's not the only guy Derek Carr's looking for. And it almost feels like after last week where, Jameis Winston came in for a spell and was just chucking the ball to Chris Olave, it almost felt like Derek Carr was watching it like, oh, I should do that. And now he started doing that. So I think we can expect some decently consistent performances from Olave, at least more so than what he was doing, because this was his first 100-yard performance post-Kamara coming back. And that's just a good sign to see. Hopefully he can get cleared in time for their game this week.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the exact same thing about Carr because we talked about it before their bye. Jameis just peppered him, and it's like you almost like hope that Jameis stays the starting quarterback. And there have still been calls after this week to make him the starting quarterback. But it's kind of good to know now that with Jameis Winston or Derek Carr, whoever it is moving forward, they are capable of leaning on Chris Olave to be really what he should have been all year. It shouldn't have taken a Michael Thomas injury. It shouldn't have taken whatever for him. Rashid Shaheed left the game Sunday as well. It shouldn't have taken that for them to start leaning on this guy. And that's why he was going in the second round in most drafts, most PPR drafts at least. And it's assuring now, right when it matters the most. Like if you drafted Chris Olave early and you're still in contention, congratulations. But But now that's the thing is if you're in that position, you're basically like getting a guy with new life here to, I said it, Zach Moss, I think I said it, but I could see Chris Olave being on a lot of league-winning teams.
Yeah, I mean, Olave will be an interesting one because, like you said, he has probably handicapped a lot of teams to this point. But, like, we have a team in our league, our boy Gary is trying to squeak into the playoffs with Chris Olave potentially. Pat is hoping he is in there instead of Gary. But, yeah, if he were to get in there, I mean, with Chris Olave being the guy that we thought he would be, that is definitely a scary possibility for those that have to face him. Finally, Tony Pollard. Pat, look, it's been 2 straight solid performances from him, but flat out, they've been touchdown dependent. I mean, look, he had 6 catches in this most recent game, which is going to buoy his value a little bit higher, which is nice.
That's the most encouraging thing to me about this was the most he'd been involved in weeks in the passing game.
Yeah, definitely helpful for his value. But look, he was still, under 80 yards rushing, but he got the touchdown. And at the end of the day, if he's getting those touchdowns, great, and he's going to be good. And on a high-powered offense like this Cowboys team, he should be getting touchdowns. That's what made it so confusing for weeks on end where he wasn't getting them. So if he can start to, plow his plow his slow ass somehow, plow his slow ass into the end zone a few more times, then his value will be a lot better. But I'm not taking these performances as being like, oh, Tony Pollard's back, because I'm just not seeing like a different player. It doesn't seem like he's unlocked. It just seems like the touchdown luck has been a little better. And even before, when we were kind of, down on him and I was saying he's just an RB2 the rest of the way, I still feel that way, but RB2 means he's not leaving your lineup, and so he should still be in there as an RB2. You're just happy with what you've been getting from him lately.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think we were at the point where you had to truly question whether Tony Pollard was going to be in your lineup. Even in 12-man leagues, that is remarkable for a guy who obviously, again, was going in the first or very early second round in most of these drafts. I have a lot of Tony Pollard. I've got a few teams with Tony Pollard, and one of them I'm somehow 10-2. We don't need to talk about that, but I don't know either. But so it's just good to see him, at least finding the end zone, because like you said, this offense has been so good all year that you'd think he would be the benefactor of it, and I think that's why so many people were so high on him coming into the year. But regardless of that, I'd love to see this the pass catching stick around, because that is huge. And I mean, that was really, where he made a lot of his money last year, obviously, with Zeke kind of being in more of the traditional down carries. Mm-hmm. So if he can kind of put that all together here, but like you said, he is a guy that needs to be in your lineup still. Until we can't, and we were really close to being able to say we can't, but I think we're going to be all right the rest of the year.
He's still keeping his role, which is what was, kind of tenuous. And again, I still think Rico Dowdle's a decent lottery ticket to keep on your bench. I don't think he's going to completely take the backfield from Tony, but I still think there's a chance he gets more involved. That said, the fact he hasn't has been a very good sign for Tony Pollard. He's been able to maintain those touches and keep, plowing them occasionally into the end zone. So hopefully he can keep doing that for you Pollard owners out there. Pat, Tony Pollard, obviously a running back, but let's get into our full backfield boogaloo segment where we kind of evaluate these backfields. Yeah, there's only a couple really to touch on here that have had, some shifting that we've kept our eye on. Number one being the Ravens. Is it finally Keaton Mitchell time? Keaton Mitchell feels like a guy that could just tease us all year and never fully break out into exactly what he's going to be, but we might be getting there, right, based on what he did this past week.
And that's why I posed it as a question as opposed to the next guy we'll talk about, who I think, that guy has arrived. Oh, God, there's more bonk, pause, whatever you guys want to say in the chat. But
Ayo.
God damn it. But the thing with Keaton Mitchell is he has, exponentially grown in snap percentage in the last 4 weeks here. And Gus Edwards has been kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down. It's weird because, you say, there needs to be a specific game script for Gus Edwards. But then, they were in control for a lot of this game against the Chargers. All of the game, what am I talking about? And
yeah,
we still didn't see a lot of Gus Edwards. And, I put it in our sheet here, but, Gus Edwards is probably the most touchdown-dependent player in fantasy football. And, again, it's a fair gamble on this Ravens team that has just been so damn good. They have been so damn good, and Lamar really hasn't been taking it in too much at the goal line. It's been all Gus Edwards. But you don't want that. I would rather if I had to start one of these two guys this coming week, they're on bye next week, excuse me. I'd rather take the flyer on Keaton Mitchell just because, like, he's going to catch the ball. Gus Edwards is, like, historically uninvolved in the passing game as a running back. He's going to be involved in the passing game, and we've seen him be able to break off these big plays. But I'm still just like, I think after week 14 or 15, god damn it, I'm struggling, whatever. We could be talking about this again, being like, what the hell happened to Keaton Mitchell? Like, why did Gus Edwards play 65% of the snaps? Why did Gus Edwards get 18 carries and score 2 touchdowns? That's the thing with this.
Right.
But, like, the one consistent thing is that he is being involved more. But it's more so just like, how involved is Gus Edwards?
Yeah, you're right. Gus Edwards' involvement does seem to be a little random. And then look, if you're out there trying to start Gus Edwards, this is how I view touchdown-dependent players in fantasy. It's like, I don't like starting them because if I'm going to start a guy, I want it to be a surprise if he goes for 2, right? I don't want to look at it and be like, yeah, that was within the realistic range of outcomes. Like, I'm not really shocked that he went for 2. That's what touchdown dependent players do. And that's what Gus Edwards, he was around 2 points this week, right? I think it was, he had 26 yards and rushing yards and 11 receiving yards. So sorry, he had like 3. That is not something I want out of a guy that I am confidently starting every week. Sometimes you fall into it and are forced to start a guy like that. You could do a lot worse than starting a guy who actually, like you mentioned, has good touchdown opportunity on this team most of the time. But yeah, not an exciting player for you to start, and it's just very depressing when that outcome does come to fruition. As far as Keaton Mitchell goes, yeah, I'm not ready to fully hand him the keys yet because I'm not fully convinced the Ravens have. This is definitely an encouraging step forward. It seems like Harbaugh is warming up to him a little bit more here as we go. But again, 9 carries for 64 yards, 2 catches for 25 yards. Like, I can't look at a guy that had 9 carries and say, yeah, he's the guy now. He's a lineup lock. Like, he did a lot with those 9 carries, sure, and it was more involved than we've seen, but it's still not like fully bankable. I think you keep him hopefully on the bench if you have that luxury for another couple weeks, I guess, because they are on bye this week, and see how things play out next week before you can definitely surefire throw him in. But Pat, we mentioned the word league winner. Like, this could definitely be like a playoff specific league winner,
a tradition, more of the traditional league winner.
Yeah, like a younger Tim Hightower, if you remember his run years back.
Oh God, Jesus! Or like I remember a couple of years ago, Rashad Penny just and Amon-Ra St. Brown both just popped the fuck off, both on my third place ass looking team. But what was I? But the one more thing about Mitchell is this game is more encouraging than the last time when I forgot who they just crushed. Was it Seattle or Detroit? One of the teams that just crushed.
They crushed both, but Seattle was more recent.
Well, the one where Mitchell was really involved, and it was just because they were up so big so early that they benched Gus Edwards. Like, you're not benched him, but they rested Gus Edwards. Like,
yes.
So everyone's like, oh, Keaton Mitchell got all these targets, all this snaps and stuff, and it's like you got to look at the context. But the context is just that Keaton Mitchell got more work than Gus Edwards.
Right. No, that's totally fair.
But again, like we've said, there have been times where something you'd think is going to happen in this Baltimore offense, at least with running back, and it doesn't. So I'm not completely ready to do it either, but he is far more intriguing going forward than Gus Edwards. And again, if something happens to Gus Edwards, Gus Edwards gets injured or Justice Hill gets injured, we could see, a really, really big spike here.
Yeah, definitely a guy to keep your eye on as you approach your fantasy playoffs because he could be the guy that puts you over the top for sure. Pat, the guy that you said has arrived indisputably is the Bears' Roschon Johnson. And what makes you say that?
I think just the way that, looking at last week, it was the Khalil Herbert show after Deontay Foreman got hurt. It was all Khalil Herbert. And even like Johnson, when Foreman was the lead guy, it was mostly Foreman. Johnson was more of a, change of pace, breather kind of back. And you'd think that would have been the perfect time to really incorporate Roschon Johnson in, was when Herbert was out. Obviously, they were keeping Johnson active over Foreman, so you'd think so, but apparently they did not believe he could handle that workload. But now Deontay Foreman's inactive, and Khalil Herbert plays, 23% of snaps, like something hilariously low. I put it in here. God, I should just look at this before I talk. 74% of snaps compared to Herbert's 21. I've talked in the past that Deontay Foreman has earned a role on this team. But again, you're the Bears. You are basically for better or for worse, tanking. Like, you're going to have that first pick. You're going to have another top 5 pick. I feel like it's time to really see what you have in Roschon Johnson. And they tried to see what they had in him, and, the numbers were not spectacular. But what did he have here? What was his line here? Yeah, 10 for 35. Not great, obviously. But again, 10 carries to Khalil Herbert 6 alone. And Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman are very fine running backs. I think they're mid. But mid seems too mid seems like a negative. I don't want to pin it negative. They're just fine. And Johnson's someone coming out of Texas that kind of got buried behind Bijan Robinson there, and people have had a lot of high hopes for him. And this would have been, in line. If this was in line with last week, we would have seen a lot more Khalil Herbert, and we didn't.
Yeah, this caught me by surprise, I will say. Roschon Johnson's a guy that, we had kind of been waiting to emerge, and then kind of emerged when at least maybe I least suspected it. Khalil Herbert, like you said, dominated work coming off of the injury, and then here's Roschon Johnson taking 74% of the snaps. This just kind of turns the Bears' backfield into one to kind of stay away from, in my eyes. I mean, which players you want as your Bears running back lottery ticket may have shifted a little bit in terms of order, but this surprised me. Maybe Roschon turns into a thing here down the stretch. He's certainly worth, a speculative ad if he's available or what have you. But yeah, this one surprised me for sure. It just felt like it came out of nowhere.
But at the end of the day, do you really want to start any of these guys? Probably not, unless you're put into that situation. And that's the thing. That's the big difference between Mitchell and Johnson, though, is that, Johnson is here. Johnson seems to have the role cut out, but Mitchell's got just a way higher ceiling here, just, with how bad the Bears are. And he's not a wide receiver screen, so I don't think they're, that's going to be incorporated very much. And obviously, we've seen Justin Fields running the ball a lot more these last few weeks, too, which obviously takes away carries from the running back room. We'll see if Deontay Foreman comes back this week, what it's like. I honestly could see a situation where he's inactive again, where it kind of goes back to this, to the way it was week 2, 3, 4. But if he comes back, though, this could just be, I'd still expect Johnson to lead the way in snaps and touches and everything, but it's just going to be too much of a bogged down mess to really want to put any of these guys in your starting lineup.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess. General spoiler alert for our Backfield Boogaloo segment. If we are talking about a team and players in this segment, you probably don't want to start. You probably want your running back to emerge from this segment before you actually end up starting any of them. So yeah, Keaton Mitchell and Roschon Johnson, neither one you're particularly eager to get in your lineup right now, but still both guys that you don't mind having on your bench.
Yeah,
and
probably the two most intriguing running backs here. I'll say intriguing just because we don't know what they're gonna do, but
sure,
there's the chance. You definitely can see the chance.
Yeah. Now, let's move into our pickups of the week here, Pat. We only got a couple of them here. I feel like there weren't a ton of, guys who are definitely unowned in leagues that popped off and have a clear role going forward. But a few guys we want to touch on. Look, Zach Moss at the very top of the list, like we mentioned. He's 58% owned on ESPN, right around that on most other platforms. So, 50% chance he's available in your league. Go check because he is the absolute priority this week. But after him, Pat, one of your namesake players, your tight end, your boy,
pals.
Pat Freiermuth, is alive. He could be a viable pickup. He is 42% owned in ESPN League, so a slightly better chance that he might be available.
Yeah, with Mark Andrews going down and then just the current state of the tight end, Pat Freiermuth, not only do I think you should pick him up, I think you should pick him up and start him if you have that need at tight end. For him to be as involved as he was, I think 9 for something really good. Again, I should pull these things up before I open my mouth. 9 for 120 on 11 targets. Next highest was Deontay Johnson with 8 targets and 4 catches compared to his 9.
And Deontay Johnson is a bitch. So Freiermuth stock up.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on there.
That's a case where it's almost you're not good enough to be a diva.
No, not at all. You and your 4 catches for 50 yards, we can find that elsewhere.
T.O. Chad Ochocinco, guys like that. It's they're divas, but they back it up on that football field. Deontay Johnson, you're again a very good player, very fine player.
Sure.
Stop. But
yeah,
that was why I liked Pat Freiermuth so much going into the year, was that in the games that Kenny Pickett started last year, Freiermuth was the security blanket guy, was the check down guy. And in a tight end position where not a lot of these guys get a ton of catches here, even if he doesn't score the touchdown, that's like, look, he drops 21 points in full point PPR without a touchdown for a tight end. That's insane. That's an insane number. And is he going to catch 9 passes every game? Probably not. But
is Kenny Pickett going to complete 9 passes every game?
No, exactly. But also a promising, I guess, a promising first week under the new regime there in Pittsburgh. But I think almost like similar to like Olave, a lot of the reasons why people liked him as much as they did are finally coming to fruition in fucking week 12. Obviously, because of injuries and Matt Canada just being the biggest clown on this side of the Mississippi.
No, it's funny because it's like the stars are aligning for Pat Freiermuth, but usually when you use that phrase, it sounds like, things are coming together that you didn't expect to come together. The stars for Pat Freiermuth are just don't have a shit offensive coordinator and be healthy. He now has those two things, and it may be a pathway to him being a top 10 tight end potentially the rest of the way. You mentioned a good start for them post Matt Canada. 400 yards of offense. Look, it only led to 16 points, which is a whole other problem. But 400 yards of offense is a good start. They did not do that under Matt Canada one time. So this is definitely arrow trending up for them.
And they also outgained their opponent for like the first time dating back to like last year, like 16 plus. I don't remember the exact number, but it was at least like 15 games. So that is remarkable too. But yeah, if anyone is going to benefit from this, it's going to be Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah, and this is what we said about, maximizing the fact that you somehow had a good record despite all those circumstances. Get rid of Matt Canada and see what you can do after that. Now you've got the Steelers who are sitting there, firmly in a playoff spot right now, and with probably nowhere to go but up, or at least, staying the same now as what they just did this past week, hopefully turning those yards into a few more points the rest of the way, all to the benefit of Pat Freiermuth and, honestly, the rest of the Steelers, as long as Deontay Johnson stops being a fucking bitch. Okay. One final pickup here. We've got Jaden Reed of the Green Bay Packers, 32% owned on ESPN leagues. Pat, honestly, this is a guy who was on a lot of like waiver wire articles and stuff over the past couple weeks. And I was kind of just ignoring him, truthfully. I didn't care. Like, it was just another rookie receiver who was putting together some good games. But this is now a guy who's looking like a potential focal point of this offense, and Jordan Love is looking a lot more confident as the season goes on. Jaden Reed is a guy who could absolutely lock down your flex spot for, I won't say the rest of the season, but he at least becomes an option here. Let me pull up his statistics as well, because like you, I opened my mouth without actually, pulling up his stats. I know he's put up good fantasy numbers thus far.
He had a great game
the
on
last couple weeks,
as did Christian Watson.
Yes, so Jaden Reed's Thanksgiving statistics, look, 8 targets is what you want to see. That is leading the Packers this past week. Only turned that into 4 catches for 34 yards, but he also had a touchdown. The fun thing here, and I think what keeps him or puts him more on the radar, is that he is being used like a gadget player, and he had 2 carries for 16 yards. He's a guy that they want. Yeah, they want to move him all over the field. They want to get the ball in his hands, and that is a good sign on a team that, truthfully, is a little desperate for playmakers because Aaron Jones just can't seem to stay healthy. So Jaden Reed may be a guy, and again, with my basically all rookie lineup, I wasn't looking at him, but he could be a guy that very much sniffs your lineup if you are able to get your hands on him.
Yeah, I think he's a bit more of a speculative ad than the previous 2 guys who obviously we think you could put in your lineup right away and they'll help you win. Just because of how inconsistent we've seen the Packers. Like you said, though, Love has been getting better the last few weeks. Obviously, they just outdueled the Lions at home, where the Lions, are typically great, but they just stomped on them. So, but yeah, Jaden Reed seems to be maybe the favorite target of Jordan Love. Obviously, Christian Watson's there, especially with Luke Musgrave out. That's another guy that Love has a good rapport with, But yeah, Jaden Reed is a guy, again, I'm not ready to put him in my starting lineup this week, but if you've got a free bench spot, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, the only reason I would say he could be a flex play is, 15 plus PPR points in his last 3 games. And the snap percentage just keeps going up. 73% of snaps in week 12 was his highest of the season. 69% the week before, was his previous, he had 78% of snaps in week 8, but the 73 and 69 over the last 2 weeks were the next 2 highest snap totals of the season for him. Seems like they want to get him on the field. Seems like they want to keep him on the field. And when he's on the field, Jordan Love is looking for him in a bunch of different ways. So definitely a solid guy to have, at least on your bench, like you said, going forward to see how things play out. Pat, we had a viewer question, as I was putting together our actual viewer questions, they mentioned the playoffs and just what we thought about them. So I decided to turn it into an entire little segment here just to give it a once over here of what the playoff situation currently looks like. Because I think all people really know, if you're not following it, is, who's winning each division and maybe who's in the mix, who has a good enough record to be in the mix. But it is truly jarring to look at who has a playoff spot right now. So in the AFC, I think more so than the NFC, because look, in the AFC, here are your top 4 seeds. It's the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Miami Dolphins. There's really no surprises there. After that, the final 3 seeds, all 3 wild cards in the AFC are the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cleveland Browns, and the Indianapolis Colts. And I know that, especially the Steelers and the Browns, that might not surprise you because they're having a solid year. But thinking of just the rosters, at least particularly the offenses of all 3 of those teams I just mentioned, you're like, how do those make up roughly half of the AFC playoff field? Because it is wild. So I wanted to just go over that and the NFC. So in the NFC, we've got the Eagles, the Niners, the Lions, and the Falcons. Then the wild cards are the Cowboys, the Seahawks, and the Vikings. Pat, I'm curious how you see this playing out the rest of the way. Are there any teams that stick out to you as this team absolutely will not stay where they are, or this team absolutely will jump into the field? Is there anything that sticks out to you here?
I don't know if they're necessarily going to play their way out of the playoff field because they have a nice 7-4 record right now. But Cleveland here, obviously, they've gotten surprisingly solid play from Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Obviously, now he went down. And P.J. Walker is just not it. He has not been good in his chances this year, even in Carolina. Before that, he had not been very good. So, and again, in such a tough division where, even Cincinnati will probably still at least be competitive. They're going to play Pittsburgh. They're going to play Baltimore. That's going to be a tough road there. And, the biggest thing that, I guess on the other hand, the Colts, it's funny because you're like, how are they here? But you look at it, it's like, they've got some really solid skilled players. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss. God, I have my
Zach
mouth
Moss,
is drier than the
Mike
Sahara
Tyson.
thaw I'm lifting with my mouth. Zach Moss has been incredible beyond expectation when he has been the starter. And obviously, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs has looked really good. So it's not terribly surprising. I mean, we've seen Gardner Minshew kind of as maybe the high-end backup quarterback. But I guess the scheme under Shane Steichen has been good enough to where they could kind of just put him in there. Imagine what this team would do with Anthony Richardson, man. He was fun.
I know.
They'd certainly be more dynamic, but that's the way I see it. It's just so shocking to see, Buffalo and Los Angeles and Cincinnati all be out because obviously, Burrow's out now, but Burrow played every game. This was Burrow's first game he missed, and they were 5-5 to begin with. And especially after seeing Denver get a 70-piece put on their domes by Miami to turn the season around as much as they have. I mean, that defense is really strong, and I mean, that was kind of their calling card going into the year. So, do I think they're going to make the playoffs? No, but a remarkable turnaround either way. No matter how the year ends for them.
It's funny.
Let's ride.
It's funny you say that. I do think they're going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
That was one of the two. So I see the AFC moving a little more than the NFC because, again, the AFC sticks out as having some pretenders in here, I think a little more than the NFC. Disrespectful to call the Browns pretenders given how good their defense is, but like we mentioned, I just think that quarterback situation might sink them the rest of the way. Look, the Broncos, the rest of the season, do not have super daunting schedule. They got the Texans. Obviously, that could be a very good game this week. Then they have to face the Chargers twice. They got to face the Lions. That'll be tough. They got the Patriots, and then they got the Raiders. There's a situation where they could pack on, 4 or 5 wins here the rest of the way. And with how well they're playing and with how well their defense is playing and Russell Wilson on a little bit of a mini renaissance here, Cortland Sutton's having a great season now.
Yeah.
I do think the Broncos, I think they're feeling it with Sean Payton right now, and I think they're going to keep it going. I mean, people, and me included, kind of just wrote them off mentally after they gave up 70 to the freaking Dolphins. And now they've just ripped off 5 straight. They haven't allowed more than 22 points, all season, in their 5-game win streak. It has just been a massive, massive turnaround for them. And then the other team that I think is going to sneak in here is the Houston Texans. And look, the game between the Broncos and Texans this week is going to muddy that picture for one of the 2 teams I'm predicting to make it, but I do think the Texans can make it as well. I think they are playing just extremely well. And I don't see the Colts or Browns, holding on to their playoff spots. And one team I do want to mention that I'm not going to say is going to get in is the Bills. I think the skid is going to continue because their schedule is brutal. Like, not only have they lost games that they shouldn't lose, but now they have to go to at Kansas City next week. They're on bye. Bills are on bye this week? Must be, because their next game is December 10th.
Yes, they are, sadly.
Yeah, so their next game will be at the Chiefs on December 10th. Then they're at home versus the Cowboys on the 17th. Then they've got Chargers and Patriots, winnable games. And then they're at the Dolphins to close out the season. This team is 6-6. Like, you can't lose more than... You can't lose 3 of those games, and they're probably going to lose 3 of those games.
Even at best, it seems like 9-8 is the best case scenario there,
right?
And that may not be good enough. I think there's a really good chance that that's not good enough. And then obviously we talked about some coaches on the hot seat, but if that is the case, Sean McDermott needs to be blasted into outer space. Like, I don't care that, how good they've been under him, but it's almost like the Andy Reid situation in Philadelphia, or even the Doug Peterson situation in Philadelphia, where like they obviously had a lot of success, but it's not working right now. And with a talented roster that can win right now, you need to inject some life into that team. And Sean McDermott is not that right now. Not that at all right now. I've seen Bills fans, sticking up for him. And yeah, he's a great coach. And I think he's another guy that a lot of teams would be calling if the Bills do move on from him. But that can also be true. And the fact that he needs to go.
Yeah, the Bills, I don't think anybody saw this coming from the Bills. I mean, based on what they've done the past few seasons, I don't think we had any reason coming into this year to expect like a big step forward or anything, but it was just we expected, at least status quo of them continuing to be one of the best teams in the AFC, and they have absolutely not been that. So I don't think they're going to end up in the playoffs. I'm calling Texans and Broncos take the spots of the Browns and the Colts, and otherwise I think it will hold strong in the AFC. As far as the NFC goes...
Man.
Yeah, as far as the NFC goes, I mean, look, I think the division winners will hold. Obviously, the most hanging in the balance division is the NFC South because it's just a fucking mess. But the Falcons, it doesn't matter. The Falcons have a fairly easy schedule the rest of the way. I mean, so does probably the whole division because they just have to play each other. But they have a relatively easy schedule the rest of the way. I think they are probably the most talented team, even though they don't have the most talented quarterback in the division. They probably have the third best quarterback in that division right now, maybe.
That's a hit.
Oh, it's tough.
Who are we putting first? Are we putting Baker? Or are we putting?
I think I might put Baker first.
I think so too. No!
I think it's Baker, Carr, and then you can't put Bryce above.
No,
so
I'd still put Ritter over Bryce Young.
Yeah. So unless you're dipping into the backups
I might put
of
Kyle
some of these
Trask
teams,
over Bryce Young.
I might put Jameis as number 1 in this division. Truthfully, even though he's not starting, it might be Jameis then Baker then Carr. Regardless, I think Ritter. He's not the strength of this team, but he can hopefully steer the ship of what is an overall very talented roster still.
And obviously we compare this Falcons team to Titans teams of the past, obviously with the Arthur Smith connection, but this team has a system, and those Titans team only needed someone competent like Ryan Tannehill. Desmond Ritter's not that, but the question is, can he be competent enough to just get them in the playoffs? But the funny thing is all this talk about the Cowboys are going to blow their doors off. Would that not be the most Cowboys thing ever? To just finally be the year where it's wow, the Cowboys look great. Obviously, they can't win the division because the Eagles, and now they get to go play a gimme game against a fraudulent NFC South winner and lose on the road in the first round. That would just be the most Cowboys thing ever. And
they were in this position last year though, and they didn't do it because they played at Tampa last year, but it was Tom Brady though, so that would have been a more excusable loss, but they didn't lose it, and they actually won that game by 2 scores. So, yes, it would be very funny if they managed to do that this year, though. I actually made a video yesterday about auctioning off the NFC South's playoff spot because they don't deserve a home playoff game. The Cowboys are going to be sitting here at 13-4 and having to go on the road again in the playoffs. It is just a comically imbalanced situation.
Say you got the keys to the NFL playoff system, seedings, whatever. Mm-hmm. Would you what would you do? Would you eliminate divisions and just say hey, the top whatever teams get in? Because my theory is I think if you win the division, you should get in, but should it go based on record? So essentially saying you can win your division and still be the 7 seed and have to go play on the road in the first round.
Yeah, I think that's one way to do it. I think obviously the most objectively fair way to seed out teams would just be to ignore divisions completely, but that does take away the fun of like the intra-division games and all that.
Obviously.
So yeah, and scheduling. So
the schedule revolves very much exclusively around your divisions.
So you can't fully do that. I think, honestly, Pat, I may just keep the seeding basically the same, but say if one team has a better record, that's where you're playing the game at. Like, one wins the division, one's a wild card, whatever. But if the Cowboys are 13-4 and the Falcons are fucking 8-9, like, I know that game shouldn't be played in Atlanta. I'm sure that might be a hot take to some because, look, Cowboys, they just aren't the best team in their division, so they shouldn't have a home game. I understand where you're coming from, but that is what I would do. As far as the NFC playoff picture in general, the one change I think I would make right now is I do think the Vikings are going to fall out of it. They are currently in there as the 7th seed. Look, whoever they settle on at quarterback, I think the gas is going to run out unless Jaron Hall becomes the guy and surprises us as a rookie. But I think the Packers have a very easy schedule. Again, Jordan Love seems to be feeling it lately. But the Packers schedule the rest of the way, obviously, after the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, is Giants, Buccaneers, Panthers, Vikings, Bears. So you've got potentially 5 wins if they were to win all of them, at least 4 if they are a deserving playoff team like I think they might be. And that would put them at, 4 wins would put them at 9-8, 5 wins would put them at 10-6. And the way things are going, I do think 9-8 is probably going to be enough to get the final wild card in the NFC. So I think they take the spot from the Vikings. And then the Seahawks, this Kenneth Walker injury definitely puts a damper on them. They haven't been super impressive all year, but I don't know what team I would pick to take their spot. It would probably have to be another NFC South team. Like it would probably have to be the Saints or something, or the Falcons if the Saints were to win the division. And I'm just not gonna, in my right mind, predict that. So I think the rest of it will hold in some degree.
The first team outside of the playoff picture that comes to my mind is the Rams, just because you got a healthy Matthew Stafford, you got a healthy Kyren Williams, but they've got to play. They got to play Cleveland. They've got to go. They've got to go to San Francisco. But then they're at Baltimore as well. Excuse me. They've got a home game against Washington, a home game against New Orleans, and at the Giants. So it's like you're realistically looking at 3 more wins. What would that? Damn you, math. What would that would put them at 8 and 9 still. So like,
they'd have to steal one from one of those other good teams. But having some gimmies on the schedule, there's definitely something to be said for that, because then you hope to steal one. Like, I mean, look, the Patriots stole one from the Bills earlier in the year, and honestly, that might be the difference between the Bills getting in the playoffs or not. So these kinds of upsets can happen for sure.
It's just like broke. Oh, can the Rams play their way into the playoffs? Woke. Tommy Cutlets is going to win out for the Giants, and at 9-8, they're going to make the playoffs and win the Super Bowl.
Oh my! Stop! Yeah, Tommy DeVito's fucking Netflix special starts now. His just dream season. No, you're not doing.
And
Tommy,
then he'll be selling real estate in 2 years.
Real estate? He's going to be selling gabagool. I don't know what you're talking about. All right.
Still living at home, regardless.
Still living at home.
Which we need to make that clear. Nothing wrong with that. We do not shame people that still live at home at 26. We do not shame it whatsoever.
It's not about the age. It's more about the money, because the NFL minimum, even, I'm sure that's what he's getting, is like $900K, I think. So he doesn't need to be at home anymore.
He's got a bit more money than me.
Yeah, he's got a little. So it's understandable for others, maybe less so Tommy. But hey, if his family wants to welcome him, then so be it. Pat, we will finish things off with our viewer questions.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from.
Okay, this first question makes me slightly depressed. It is Devin Singletary a viable RB1 over Breece Hall? This question from Sunny, age 90.
Oh, God.
The reason I put this question in here is because, as you guys can imagine, yeah, maybe. And I hate to say that as a Breece Hall owner, but look, if you are in a point where you are deciding between these two guys, I'm assuming, look, he said as an RB1, I'm going to approach this question assuming that you have another running back filling another spot and that you can only pick one of these guys. But these two are just in such massively different situations. Like, Devin Singletary is, by all accounts, probably an average to maybe slightly above average talent of a player, but he's on an offense that is absolutely humming. CJ Stroud has the Texans in another stratosphere in terms of them being able to score the ball. Meanwhile, Breece Hall, an otherworldly talented player, but on probably the worst offense in the NFL right now because it's led by Tim Boyle. So what do? Like, I watched this game on Black Friday, the Black Friday special, because Amazon needs their money and they couldn't have a game on Thanksgiving. I watched that game and it was just, that offense is so pitiful, and it's like you don't want to have any sort of stock in it. And I will say, I want to address this quote from Robert Saleh from after that game. He was talking about Breece Hall, and he said, Breece Hall needs to basically take what's coming to him, take some of the easier runs. We don't need a guy that's constantly going to be, looking for the home run. He's looking for the home run too much. To which I say, dude, if he doesn't hit a home run, you guys don't fucking score. Yeah. What do you expect him to do? Like, he can take the easy yards and get 3 and then 4, and then you go incomplete on third down and then you punt. Where does that get you? Like, that gets him to 14 carries for 62 yards on the day, and you're still in the same point that you were. I don't blame him for looking for the home run. Like, I understand what he's saying in essence, because it is leading to some bad days for Breece, and we don't want to see that as fantasy owners either. But from a real-life perspective, how can you blame Breece for what he's doing on an offense led by Tim Boyle and previously led by Zach Wilson? That is maybe a digression a little bit from the question, but nonetheless, it is a valid question. I think right now, I might feel a little better about having Devin Singletary in my lineup, which is just crazy to say.
See, if Dameon Pierce were still out, I think this is an obvious answer. And the answer would be Devin Singletary there, because this man got 30 and 22 carries in back-to-back weeks. That is insane. Especially for a team that has thrown the ball so effectively with C.J. Stroud and has not run the ball so effectively, probably just because Dameon Pierce is not very good.
Right.
So I think you're relying on Pierce just not being good, so them leaning on Singletary. But this line, like, I looked at this, I was looking at all the box scores this morning, and this one made me puke. Like, Singletary 6 for 18 and Pierce 5 for 14. Stroud just casually ran for 47 yards.
He was moving a little bit, yeah.
It's a whole nother layer to his game if that can become something. But I think you're right, just because of the fact that who would have thought we'd be saying, like, the Texans have had such a solid offense that it's going to put them in a better position. And Singletary's been the better runner, at least the last few weeks. But the Jets are just so bad. The Jets are just so bad. And the Robert Saleh quote was just so asinine. Like, he's looking for the home run. Dalvin Cook's looking for the fucking retirement home. Like, Michael Carter's looking for the unemployment line. Like, these guys, like, it should be a Breece Hall show. Like, you think you would want to run your offense through your best player. Garrett Wilson's a great player too, but Breece Hall is still their best, like you said, their best bet.
Garrett Wilson requires them to put the ball in the air.
When you were talking, I was banging my head on the wall, because that's just what this question makes me want to do. I would go Singletary. Oh, God. And see, just saying it out loud just makes me not want to do it. Depends what you need.
Understand.
Depends what you need. Do you need, like, are you in a position where you're like, I need to win and I need points? Mm-hmm. If you're chasing that high point total, I'd go Breece Hall. But if you kind of just need, like, okay, I really need to win this week and I just can't have a dud, then you're going Devin Singletary. So I basically just bitched out of your answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, in PPR leagues, Singletary had, and obviously, again, most leagues are PPR. I tend to forget that because we don't play in one. But in a PPR league, Devin Singletary definitely still had a decent game, 6 catches for 54 yards. But, like, we are talking him up after probably his worst game in recent memory. Again, you mentioned the 6 carries for 18 yards is brutal, but that's how bad Breece Hall that's how bad the Jets have been, I should say. Breece Hall has been generally the lone bright spot, but this past week was just too much for him to overcome. And counting on Dameon Pierce not existing, he didn't this past week. Granted, it was his first game coming off injury, but Devin Singletary still had 82% of the snaps. If that continues, I think he's just a slightly better bet than Breece. I'm going to continue starting Breece because I have no other option. And also, fun fact, we get a clash of these two Titans here in 2 weeks when the Texans face the Jets. So that'll be a fun one to watch. We get them head to head. But yeah, right now, I'm going to lean Devin Singletary, which is gross. This question comes in from Tippy Bite and says, who to start in the flex this week? Ridley, Charbonnet, or Thielen? I wanted to use this as a launching point to talk about what in the fuck do we do with Calvin Ridley, Pat? I have zero idea. Immediately after I commit to finally benching the guy, like for good, unless he shows me something drastically different, he starts showing me something drastically different and has put together 2 really good fantasy weeks in a row. He has truly become my new age Gabe Davis, and it's driving me nuts. I think based on these 3 options, Look, it's not Thielen. Thielen just put up a dud after
Terrible
not having.
offense, too.
That offense is terrible, and Thielen is proving to be no longer bulletproof like he somehow was earlier in the year. Charbonnet is going to get a good amount of touches again because it looks like Kenneth Walker is not going to play, especially here on a Thursday night game. But such a tough defense against the Cowboys. I think, again, this is another floor versus ceiling play. I think your floor play is Charbonnet because you know the touches you're going to get, right? And he'll probably give you an okay, maybe PPR ceiling on just some dump offs and some checkdowns here and there. But Calvin Ridley's the guy that you're going to go with if you need the ceiling. I hate Calvin Ridley this year, man. I don't know. Because, I'm looking at him, right, looking ahead to my first playoff matchup where I have 2 Texans receivers against the Jets, and I'm like, should I bench Nico Collins and start Calvin Ridley instead? And then it's just like he's going to give me 2 and I'm going to cry. I don't know what to do. Pat, who would you start? I think I'd just start Charbonnet. I think that's my answer here.
I think I'd start Charbonnet too, despite the tough matchup, just because, like you said, you know he's going to get carries. It's not going to be DJ Dallas.
Yeah.
And Charbonnet is a proven pass catcher to the point where if they are trailing, Charbonnet's still going to be in the game. It's not going to be a Kenneth Walker situation where he's going to get iced out of the game thanks to the game script. But Calvin Ridley, man. I mean, I'm glad I don't own any Calvin Ridley just because that offense has looked so good the last 2 weeks, man. They have looked so good. And Trevor Lawrence, where the hell have you been, my guy? This was what people these last 2 weeks have been sensational. But the problem is that, you've got Christian Kirk, you've got Evan Engram, you've got Travis Etienne. There are multiple guys that this ball can get spread out to. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't fault you for starting Ridley. If you have Calvin Ridley and you're starting him and say, I've got to start him, I think you're okay. Just because, we've now seen 2 in a row here. With Gabe Davis, it's usually not 2 in a row.
No,
at least last year.
That's true.
We're seeing a consistent, increase in this offense's productivity here. And you think it's got to come at their best player's expense here. And you think it's got to really help Calvin Ridley up. But as long as Trevor keeps balling, he could throw it to Jamal Agnew for all I care.
Pat is not an unbiased contributor here to this question's answer because he just wants the best for Trevor, which is totally fair. The one thing to keep in mind here with Calvin Ridley is this most recent performance here, 5 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown, came on 6 targets. And that, again, makes me nervous because it's not like there's this ton of bankable volume.
True.
If he gets 6 targets next week, that could equate to 40 yards. That's just how that goes. So you would like to see a little better volume, and it just makes me a little nervous. I'd go with Charbonnet in this scenario. And then finally, who are your favorites for Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year, Pat? I think these are easy. I mean, look, CJ Stroud's got it completely locked the fuck up as far as Offensive Rookie of the Year goes. We weren't sure at first because look, quarterbacks do get a little bit of a head start with this award, but there were no quarterbacks that we thought were really in contention for it, a month and a half back or so. CJ Stroud is taking a stranglehold on this award. I mean,
he's in the MVP conversation.
Right.
He's probably not going to win it. He's probably not even going to be a finalist, but he's in that conversation. The conversation is over.
Offensive Rookie of the Year should be unanimous. And then Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go with Jalen Carter. He's been an absolute stalwart at the center of that Eagles defense. I think you've got a case for a guy like Devon Witherspoon, but
he's been fantastic. He's the only other guy who I would even consider.
Yeah, and I just think Jalen Carter's been too good. Again, it's an absolute travesty for the rest of the league that they allowed Jalen Carter to fall to the Philadelphia Eagles of all fucking teams. But those are the 2 guys I expect.
I've got a bonus viewer question that Gandhi dropped right at the beginning of the chat that I didn't want to interrupt with, but it involves my team name that Brandon brought to light today on Twitter. That my name in our league is the woke liberal bench mob. Obviously, the bench mob being Brandon's fans, or I guess our fans too. The bench mob.
Yep.
And just obviously the woke liberal mob, all that stupid shit that Aaron Rodgers and all those idiots say. I'm getting political. I mean, I don't think I don't care. It's not a secret. I'm part of the woke liberal mob, and I'm proud of it. So I don't know. I didn't really have a strong team name there, so that was just what I rolled with, and I love it. And I love it. So don't if you're not a woke liberal, don't take any offense to that. But in theory, you guys are all you guys are all a part of this.
If Pat makes the playoffs, I will be looking to take down the woke liberals. So we will have both sides, and mainly just because I was going to
reply to your tweet to say that if Brand doesn't be careful, he could be canceled by the woke liberal bench mob in the semifinals.
I actually didn't even realize the parallels between our team names. I'm the Stroud Boys, which is a Proud Boys pun. So I'm on the far right and you're on the far left as far as the fantasy team names. But that is pretty perfect, man. Maybe we are on a collision.
Yeah, that's the thing,
we are on a collision course, huh?
I'm gonna be either really happy or really sad next week because I don't even want to read off my scenarios. I'm the 4 seed right now. I don't technically control my own destiny with tiebreakers and scoring and all sorts of things can happen. But I need to win and I need to score as many points as possible. So that's what I'm going for. And if that happens, we would get there's a scenario still where I also make the playoffs and we don't square off where I could get a better seed. But like, there's a really good chance that if I make the playoffs here, you will see a 2-week-long off the bench bowl.
The pod in the middle of that matchup will be absolutely iconic when we know the scores that we each have and what we're because like for a lot of leagues don't do this actually, so we should mention it. Our league does 2-week playoff matchups, so each matchup goes for 2 weeks. It's great. I think it takes away a little bit of the randomness that fantasy football naturally has, and hopefully lets the better team come out on top. But yeah, there would be a pod in the middle of our matchup where we're sitting there like, okay, this is what our team did, and the outcome is still up in the air. So that would be a trip. I'm hoping that happens, but we will let you guys know.
And I also may be zoinked off my ass next podcast because I am getting back surgery the day before. I'm getting surgery on Monday. Hell, I might be at the fucking hospital recording this episode. So just expect me to just be as unhinged as possible, especially if I don't make the playoffs. It's just going to be the hits. I may just tell the doc to just amputate everything above my waist if I don't make the playoffs.
We're going to get Pat eliminated from the playoffs off the absolute gas in the hospital, and it is going to be a mess. Pat is probably, I don't know if your camera is going to be activated for this next week's pod, but if it is, I hope it's above you on the ceiling, pointed down at your bed.
That was what one of my friends said. One of my friends said you should just like tape your phone to your ceiling and get an aerial shot. I kind of fuck with that, so.
Oh, man. All right. Well, next week's show promises to be an adventure. You guys will know whether Pat made the playoffs and whether Pat's back is in one piece or not. So we will keep you guys updated. Guys, thank you for listening to this slightly extra long edition of Off the Bench. But for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys.